Hey guys, got another game for you. This time's going to be featuring ixxdeee in a undead lobby. And if you know how much I love ixxdeee in undead, even especially if there's the beast in the lobby, you know that what we're going to be trying to do. ixxdeee has the hero power Avenge 4. It summons a whelp that attacks immediately, where this can be really strong, especially with the current undead comps, is that there's a lot of units right now that synergize with summoning units in the middle of combat. And summoning units in the middle of combat is kind of how you get a lot of the ixxdeee scaling. The main comps you want to be looking for to do this is the undead attack buff comps, or potentially if you end up flexing into beast, you can do some type of Goldrin comp. But obviously, undead has the most synergy with this. In the early game, your main plays, in my opinion, is to just try and get your hero power to proc as many times. Unlike a lot of the other heroes, taking a lot of the one drop summons are actually stronger on ixxdeee. If you think about it, if you take a minion that summons two bodies, something like the Mana Saber, what you end up getting is essentially a free proc of your hero power off of just that minion, because it's doing three summons. If you have just the summon from the hero power that's like triggering like the start of a chain, then you have four deaths there. What's kind of interesting with the ixxdeee is like the first summon takes four, but everyone after that only takes three summons because the summon itself is dying. So really, one drop summons are actually some of the strongest units that you can take while playing her. Some key minions you should be looking for in the mid game. The first would be really just take any of the attack buffing undead cards. The main ones that you should be looking for: Nerubian Death Swarmer on 2. This has the battle cry, give your undead one attack. And then the one that we'll be using for the bulk of the game is Anubarak Nerubian King. This is Death Rattle, your undead gain one attack. The other one that you can get a couple of times off of just like random summons is potentially Champion of the Primus, but I find this one's just a little too inconsistent and don't generally use it quite as much. The other thing that's really important is trying to reborn your Anubaraks. This will let you get a second proc, and really what you start doing with this undead comp is trying to get as many attack buffs in the mid game, and eventually you can sell out of the buffers towards the end game. However, we'll talk about why we didn't do that in a little bit later. The other key card that you should try to find, at least in the mid game, and I generally sell out of it around turn like 9-ish, is Putrid Pupil. The reason you sell out of it is one, you end up getting so many spells in your hand that you start like losing minions when doing this comp, especially if this specifically if you took our Bleeding Heart as a lesser trinket. But you'll end up summoning so many units in the combat that you really just run out of space in your hand, and it's a baby rage, I have too many cards kind of moment. So I find that this one's pretty good for just trying to get to four, having a little bit more of a solid board before you find the key like attack buff undead units. But generally, I don't think it's smart to hold on to the putrid people too long. The only exception would be is if you're using the one set of trinkets that gain attack whenever you play a spell, because you can potentially generate 2 to 3 spells a turn off of just the pupil and having some good undead units that are scaling, and that gives you, +3 attack a turn is essentially on par with the other attack buff generators in the undead comps. Something that's really important to try and utilize in this comp is that ixxdeee has a very strong early game. Because of this, you should be getting to the higher tavern tiers earlier and start getting a solid board in earlier than the rest of the lobby. Because you have this higher health going into the late game, something that you should be trying to do is keeping your scaling units like the Anubarak and the Titus Rivendell as long as possible. I think it's really important to try and keep them until you're either in a top 4 scenario or in a point where if you lose a fight, the opponent would like kill you. If you're not in those situations, I think it's still better to potentially sack rounds in the top 4 to give yourself some more attack and get to the late game. What's also kind of important is you want to get your non-summoning units to be the first ones dying. This would be your Mummifiers, your Anubraks, potentially any taunted units. Have those die, and that way you have the ability that most of your summons are going to be able to take a spot on the board and not clog your hand. Something that you really risk is Onyxia's hero power stopping a death rattle or bleeding heart summon or something like that. So I find it's really good to try and keep those non-summoning units as long as possible, and that will also give you more scaling going into the league. The core units for this comp would be some type of summoner, so Cadaver Caretaker or Handless Forsaken are the main ones that come to mind, potentially as a 6-drop. You can also take the Reborn Summoner, or really that's about it. Sometimes you'll also take Colossus of the Sun, but that's just more of a late game, just like it gets 4 attacks off, but it's only 2 summons. But really your key core is the summoning type unit, and then Anubrak, Mummifier, and Baron Rivendell. The reason for this is that you want to get the most amount of undead attack buffing procs, and then you want to multiply that effect to the most number of units that you're summoning. And that's how this comp ends up turning exponential. Is you start putting a Titus in, and then your +1 attack became +2 attack. Your 1 summon becomes 2 summons, and so on, so on. And really, this gets even stronger with your Onyxia hero power and the Bleeding Heart, because if you summon 2 units instead of 1 unit, well, you just doubled those procs as well. So, anyways, this ends up being a very long game. I don't want to ramble on for the entire time because it ends up being something like 16 turns, and I'll completely understand if you just want to like play it like 2x or not even really listen to it, because it's from here it's a very typical ended game. Really just this is a really fun comp to play. I find it's really hard to tech against because you have so much anti-scam built into undeads, and really the only way to beat this is to be a true stat check, and you will end up losing to things like mechs or quill wars when they get going, but really a lot of it is you're just trying to like pop off and get those players out of the lobby before they have the chance to build a true beatboxer board or a true like a gem board. This comp really has its strongest turns from like turn 10 to 12ish, and then from there you kind of are at a threat of other comps outscaling you. Yeah, anyways, hopefully this helps you. Hopefully it helps kind of explain the comp and the synergies that you're doing with Onyxia and the Bleeding Heart trinket. Good luck on your guys' climb. See you out there. Bye.